Before we start with today's class, why don't we see the answers for the assignment? Remember, you had an assignment for GIF. You had to identify the type of community of each GIF. It was pretty easy, right? Yes, the top left corner is a farmer. So it is a rural community. The top right corner is a tribal community. And that big train which is passing by belongs to the urban community. Let's see the next assignment. What type of occupation is there on the screen, children? Yes, you can see the hens pecking away. So that is poultry. You can see the bee in a beehive. So that is beekeeping. Also honey collecting. You can see those little lambs jumping, isn't it, happily? That is sheep rearing. And you can see the small silkworms coming out of their cocoon. That is sericulture. Let us look at the answers for the fill in the blanks. First, group of people living in a specific area for a long period of time is called community. Second, members of community develop a sense of we feeling. Group of people living in villages or small towns is called rural community. The main occupation of rural community is agriculture. Plow is manufactured by a blacksmith. I hope you have all written the answers. Do you remember what we learnt in the last class? We learnt what a community is. A group of people who share the same things like live, work, play, and it's a place where people stay together and solve their problems, right, children? And we learnt what are the features of community, the we feeling, the togetherness, and staying at a place for a long time. Also, we learnt the different types of communities. What are the three types of communities? Yes, rural community, urban community, and tribal community. And we also saw the occupations of a rural community. Which is the main occupation of a rural community, children? Very good. Agriculture is the main occupation of the rural community. What about the other occupations? There are many, right? You have sheep rearing, dairy farming, poultry keeping, beekeeping, so many other occupations also we saw. Now let's start with today's class. In today's class, let us talk about the problems faced by the rural community. When you have traveled to villages or when you have traveled to different places, you would have seen villages en route in your travel. There are a lot of differences between the cities, towns, and villages. Of course, the villages have unpolluted air, lovely scenery, but the other amenities or the other things which are there in the villages are less. What are the different things which we find a problem over there? When you travel, you would find that most of the roads are not that good. When you reach there, you will find that the electricity is very erratic and you don't have it at all the time. Let us deal some problems one by one. Look on the screen, children. You have two problems there. One, the problems related to hygiene, and second, the problems related to health and multiple diseases. Now, hygiene is very important. Personal hygiene helps you to be healthy. Now, you can see in most of the villages, the hygienic conditions are rather low because of the unavailability of plenty of water. The same water is used for bathing, for drinking, and the other purposes. That leads to a lot of diseases. And you can see that the hospital facility is also very less in the villages. There may be just one government hospital in one small village or maybe one private hospital for 3 to 4 villages. Though the government has appointed many workers called the Asha workers to help the villagers, still there's rampant diseases which goes on in the villages. So what are the two problems you see here, children? Problems related to hygiene and health and multiple diseases. Here on the screen you can see two more problems. One is the education and the other is the poverty. You study in schools which have big buildings and you have all the comforts of good benches and chairs, and you have a computer lab and lab for your different science experiments, a playground and so on. But what about the children in the villages? The buildings in which they study usually have only thatch roofs or mud tiles. When it rains heavily, the water leaks through. Most of the schools are only single floored ones where there's just two rooms. From elementary up to 8th standard, they have to study in the same place. Facilities for higher education is also not available. When you go to your villages, you would hear that they had to send their children to the nearest bigger towns or bigger villages to get higher education. This is one of the problems which is there in the rural areas. And of course, many of the people, due to different reasons, are quite poor in the rural areas. We will look at the reasons in the next few slides. Let us see some more problems and also the reasons for poverty. Now, one main problem haunting all our villages, or for the matter, even cities, is excessive drinking. The money which the villagers get itself is very less, and the entire amount is spent in drinking. So the money never reaches home. This leads to poverty. And as we have learned that maximum occupation is agriculture. But due to the lack of money, they use all traditional methods of agriculture, and all kind of unscientific agricultural practices are used, like they use the age old practice of collecting all the saplings and replanting them and so on. Nowadays you have tractors and so on, all this, and they are not able to use because they don't have the money to buy modern agricultural equipments. So these two reasons, like excessive drinking and unscientific agricultural practice, also leads to poverty in the rural areas. Some more reasons for poverty in the villages is the jobs. They do have jobs, but the jobs are mostly underpaid. They don't get the total amount which is required, and they don't have the jobs all the time. Unemployment, see, most of the agricultural practices depending upon rain. If there are no rains, no agriculture, then no jobs. This also leads to poverty. The worst problem which is there in the rural areas is the illiteracy. What does illiteracy mean? The capacity to neither read nor write. Most of the villagers are not educated. They cannot even write their own names or read anything. You can see that the villagers, when they go to government offices, use their thumb impressions in official documents. What does that show? They cannot read. Why does this problem occur? Because of the poverty, they do not send their children to schools. Right from a very young age, the children are forced to work. Because of this, they do not get the education which is very important. This is the greatest sadness that most of the people are illiterate in villages. To solve all the problems which we have seen in the villages and many more which we have not mentioned, the government has introduced many schemes to help the development of villages. See, there are many kinds of villages. There are villages which are fully civilized, which have all the modern amenities. But there are some villages which are still very backward. So the government has introduced certain schemes. Let us see the schemes one by one. The first scheme which we are going to see is the Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Yojana. What does the word Pradhan Mantri mean? Yes, Prime Minister. Rozgar, Daily Wages Yojana scheme. It is a scheme introduced by the government in the name of Prime Minister to give daily wages to the employees. Now, most of the people who work in the villages, they cannot wait for an entire month's salary to reach. They need the money every day to buy certain items and help their family. So this scheme helps them. What is the scheme, children? Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Yojana. The next scheme is the Jawahar Gram Samruddhi Yojana. This is just like the Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Yojana but a better one. It has been designed to improve the quality of life of the rural people by providing them additional and gainful employment or jobs. What is the scheme? Jawahar Gram Samruddhi Yojana. The next scheme introduced by the government is called the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Now, this is introduced by the government to help in universalization of primary education. It is important that every child has the right to education. So, what they want due to the scheme is that to provide compulsory and free education to all children between the ages 6 to 14. What does that mean? All the children will be able to get primary education free, and this will be made compulsory so that all the parents will send their children to school. This was started by the Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Under this, one more scheme was introduced which is known as RTE, the Right to Education. At present, that is followed here in Bangalore also. So, which is the scheme, children? Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. The next scheme we are going to learn is the Nirmal Gram Yojana. It is very important to spread awareness regarding sanitary facilities in the villages. This leads to better hygiene. Better hygiene will reduce the health and different diseases. Thus, this was introduced by the government to spread awareness and help by giving lot of money to the villages for building better sanitary infrastructure. In some of the villages, the birth of the girl child is not appreciated. They feel if a girl child is born, it will create a lot of expense for them. So the government introduced Bhagyalakshmi Yojana, where a certain amount of money is deposited for every girl child born in rural areas. Bhagyalakshmi Yojana. The next scheme introduced by the government is the Ashraya Yojana. Many of the villagers suffer because they have the kinds of houses with thatch roofs and mud tiles, which really deteriorates or falls down during excessive conditions like tsunamis, rains, and so on. So, the government is helping the villagers to build proper houses with cement and bricks. This scheme is known as the Ashraya Yojana. The next scheme which we are going to discuss is the Samagra Gramina Abhivriddhi Yojana. That means it is a scheme which is introduced in the villages to create better facilities for the villagers. It could be in the form of health facilities, better transport, better electricity facilities, school buildings, college buildings, and so on. Samagra Gramina Abhivriddhi Yojana. The next scheme which we are going to learn here is the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. It is quite clear what the scheme is supposed to do. Giving better roads for the villages. You can see that most of the roads which lead to villages are rutted and full of potholes, and once the rain comes, it is very difficult to travel over them. So now the government is providing grants and money in form of aid so that they can lay better cement roads or tar roads to help travel easy to the villages. Which is the scheme? Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. The next scheme we are going to learn is the Vajpayee Arogya Shri Yojana. I hope you all know who Vajpayee sir was. Yes, who was he? He was the Prime Minister of India. He had introduced an Arogya Shri Yojana, that means a health scheme. He felt that there are so many people in the rural areas who do not have enough money to treat for their sickness. So, A BPL or a below poverty line scheme was created, and a BPL card was created which acts like an insurance. If they are sick, they can use the BPL cards and they can be treated for free in government hospitals. This has helped many villagers to overcome their sickness. Which is a scheme, children? Vajpayee Arogya Shri Yojana. Children, please take out your classwork and start writing these points. There are many problems faced by the villagers. They are problems related to hygiene, health conditions, poor education facilities, underpaid jobs, poverty, illiteracy, unemployment, unscientific agricultural practices, excessive drinking, and multiple diseases. Some more points, children. The government has introduced certain schemes for the development of villages. They are Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Yojana, Jawahar Gram Samruddhi Yojana, Sarva Siksha Abhiyana, Bhagyalakshmi Yojana, Nirmal Gram Yojana, Ashraya Yojana, Samagra Grameen Abhivriddhi Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Vajpayee Arogya Shri Yojana. Please write all these points in your classwork. Let us do a home assignment. Identify the problems faced by the rural community by looking at the pictures on the screen. Observe the pictures properly and write what are the problems. Another home assignment, children. By looking at the pictures, you have to identify what are the schemes introduced by the government to help the rural areas. Let us do fill in the blanks now, children. The first one, the reasons for illiteracy among the rural population are poverty, unemployment, and lack of dash. In rural areas, due to unhygienic conditions, there are multiple dash. Farmers get very less yield from their crops because of dash agricultural practices. Fifth, the scheme introduced by the government for providing better education to the children in rural area is for laying better roads. The government has introduced Dash Yojana. Please write them, children. We will discuss the answers in our next class. Thank you.